Mike is here.
Do any of the planning commission members know they're supposed to be here for this? Or on Zoom?
Right now,
Like,
we've
you got
got,
two people showed up.
I'm here.
Well, we can leave. We just adjourn.
Also, is that Tim Johnson named Jan today?
I think
that might be his wife's name.
Yeah, it is.
I'm using her computer, so if that's okay.
So I probably shouldn't talk if they can hear me.
I can hear you. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
What? No, I can't hear you, Tim.
Okay, then.
Yep. Loud and clear, Tim.
All right, good.
Are all these applications complete?
Well, I guess it depends on your definition of complete.
100% ready to go. No more visiting and talking.
Well, of course, the board can always give preliminary approval, subject to final approval by the zoning administrator, which is
Other
later.
words, they're not complete.
Well, I mean, look, it's been my experience that nobody's ever really fully 100% complete ever.
We can make them.
Well, we could. And that can delay things, but
That's, you know,
But we already delayed it. I mean, we already delayed by not having it done.
it wouldn't delay it if they were 100% complete.
yeah, this kind of comes down to the philosophy of the city, and I'm not part of that. That's a policy decision. I'm just the administrator.
Just my policy is that if they aren't complete, why are we looking at them?
And we wouldn't do anything if we had to wait for their complete to do anything with
You
them.
know, what's wrong with that?
That's fine.
So when they ask me, I don't know nothing.
Yeah, me neither.
All right. I'll be good. Clint's here.
Looks like we've got 5 so far.
Yeah. What do you got? McGraw.
I can't stay on that at dinner for,
I know, I'm jealous.
well, calm down, come on.
Dang.
If we're ever done, right?
Yeah, it'll probably go pretty
10 o'clock.
fast. I have to close at 10, so.
I know, we ran into that last night.
Did you guys have fun last night?
Oh, yeah.
I stayed home late.
You're not the only one that,
The Legion was pretty busy.
Yeah.
When I just drove by, it looked pretty busy.
We had an early start, early to start, early to bed, you know?
Yeah.
It was good to see people.
Yeah, there's been people waiting a long time to get back out, so.
Yeah.
I'm tired of getting down there to go to the hospital today.
Mr. Conley, if you can hear me, it looks like we have 5 planning commission members if you want to get started.
Thanks, Mike. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I was having technical issues myself until just this moment. So if I'm running late, I apologize for that. So we can call the meeting to order then if we have 5. So calling the meeting to order, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the
To the
flag
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so time for roll call. Is Mr. Hall there?
Yeah.
Ms. Hamel?
Present.
Mr. Hoag? Okay, I can't see the screen, but is Mr. Hoag there? And I can't tell from where I'm at.
He's not here in the council chambers.
Okay. Mr. Merlington,
Present.
welcome aboard, by the way. Mr. McGrath,
Here.
Mr. Nixon. Take it he's not there?
I believe he just joined. but
Oh, I see him there. Okay, I see him on. I'll come back to him in just a moment. And Mr. Conley, of course, I'm here. Is Mr. Nixon available? I see your name on the screen. There he is. I see him. So
Mr. Conley,
Nixon is here.
I apologize. I just received an email from Mr. Hogg who indicates he's having technical difficulties, so I'll try to work with him to get him on the Zoom meeting.
Okay, thank you. Tonight, I see that we have our planning official. We have Mr. Tim Johnson here, and I'm not sure. We have Mr. Womack, obviously, and I heard I see Miss Johnson's there. Is there anyone else in there, Mr. Womack? Okay. If you've had a chance to look at the minutes, we need to approve last meeting's minutes. If anyone's got anything that they want to, that they notice there that we should bring up, let me know or let us know. If not, I'll take a motion to approve last meeting's minutes.
I'll motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, do you see anything in there? If it's all fine, we'll move ahead. Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes, signify aye, please.
Aye.
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 All opposed? Okay. Moving on, we have today's agenda that we need to approve before we move forward. I noticed a tiny typo on there. I hate even to bring it up. If on the, under old business, 9A, 4, Roman numeral 4, it says mater deed, and I'm assuming that means master deed. But other than that, I have nothing. I guess we need a motion to actually to approve the meeting to open this up to discuss. I kind of jumped ahead.
I'll motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second that. Does anyone else have anything other than my minor typo that we need to address on there?
Mr. Chair,
I'm sorry?
Mr. Chair,
Yes?
a question, are these, applications here tonight complete, I wonder? Last month, we spent over an hour on each one. And I was wondering how close to complete are we?
I'm not sure that I can answer that. I don't know if Mr. Womack can or.
We were discussing this just prior to the meeting. I guess I'm kind of the belief that these are never really complete or done until they're complete or done. So, you know, the planning commission could require changes every meeting ad infinitum. But at some point, I think they're close enough that it's probably appropriate to either just approve of them or give them preliminary approval and send it to the zoning administrator. But I take Mr. Hall's point that some of these applications are less complete than maybe we would have expected them to be. And it's requiring some additional work that we weren't really ready and prepared for. But I trust Mr. Johnson, his judgment. I read through his reports, and I guess after the planning commission reviews those with him, they'll be in a position to determine whether they think they're complete enough or not. I did see Mr. Hogg there for a second. Oh, yep, there he is. Okay, so Mr. Hogg has joined us.
I suppose if we, speaking to Mr. Hall here, if we get into this and it's clear that it's not something that can be resolved with what we have in front of us tonight, we always have the opportunity to table things. So I will move forward as directed here. Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to address on the agenda? Okay. All in favor of approving tonight's agenda with the, I'm sorry, did we actually get a motion? Did we get a motion on that? Okay.
We did.
All in favor of, I guess, before I move forward then, do we need to address that little typo in the motion, or could we just note it here?
I mean, that's a Scribner's error. I don't know if it necessarily requires a motion to change.
Okay.
It's noted and the clerk will make the appropriate correction.
I didn't want to do this in a, thank you. So all in favor of approving tonight's agenda, please signify with aye.
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 All opposed?
Aye.
Okay, I believe the motion carried. This is our opportunity for public comments. So those citizens who wish to speak tonight and have their voices heard will be allowed a maximum of 4 minutes to address their concerns. Please state your name and address for the record if you choose.
And also, Mr. Conley, that generally we allow interested members to address their particular issue during that time in the agenda. So that being said, I guess I'll call through the guests that I see here on Zoom, and if they'd like to make a public comment, they should do so when I call their name. I see a Bryce Boserdet. Would Bryce Boserdet like to make a public comment? I see.
No, sir.
Thank you. I see Bernadette Powell. Would Bernadette Powell like to make a public comment?
Yes, I do need to make a public comment. I'm sorry if you hear a lot of background. I'm at the Rotary Christmas party with the Lions Club, but I do want to make these notes because I'd like to get back to this party. I have some comments in regards to the 100-foot setback that I don't know what you're going to be doing if it's just discussion tonight. It's kind of confusion. I just want to make sure that this is really looked at in regards to buildings that we want to be rehabbed downtown Cedar Springs. If you do this 100-foot setback in regards to differences between the buildings, you're going to wipe out a lot of buildings that need to be rehabbed in this town. Also, there should be a letter from a business owner. I hope that it's read during these public comments with regards from the Hawks Nest. I hope that is read during these comments. I do have a comment in regards to the 411 17-mile single family residence problem. I have the same exact problem with my building in town. Rezoning a residential property is not going to make a difference with regards to the manufacturing and production of marijuana. I have a building, a house next to me, which is a single family residence, but it is zoned B3. I am zoned B2 right next to it, and I am unable to sell my building to a marijuana business. So rezoning around a building doesn't say that it is not being used as a single family residence. Just to point that out. I do want to congratulate all the new zoning people on the board, and I wish you the best of luck. And I will be checking in on this meeting, but I will be eating the 2 for $25 steak here at the Redbird. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next, I have Dan Larabelle. Mr. Larabelle, would you like to make a public comment at this time?
No, sir. Thank you.
I have Emily Elms. Miss Elms, would you like to make a public comment at this time?
No, thank you.
I have Frank Bowenzi. Mr. Bowenzi, would you like to make a public comment at this time? I have Jeff Haverson. Would Mr. Haverson like to make a public comment at this time?
No, thank you.
I have Josh Franstead. Would Mr. Franstead like to make a public comment at this time?
No, thank you.
I have Mr. Sorensen. Would Mr. Sorensen like to make a public comment at this time?
No, thank you.
I have a Mike, just plain Mike. Would Mike like to make a public comment at this time? Okay. I have Mike West. Would Mr. West like to make a public comment at this time?
No, thank you.
I have Race Ree. Would Race Ree like to make a public comment?
No, thank you.
And I have Ron Schaefer. Would Mr. Schaefer like to make a public comment?
Not at this time.
Ms. Johnson, is there anybody in the council chamber who would like to make a public comment? Or Mr. Hall?
Yes, we do have one member here.
Thank you, everybody, for being here, and I'd like to thank Mr. Merlington for his stepping up and helping us fill up the planning commission board, sitting right next to the dedication to his uncle, Ron Merlington.
Is that Ms. Powell? And if so, can she identify herself?
Oh, yeah, Rose Powell, Cedar Springs. And I'm gonna talk loud because I was criticized for not talking loud lately. Anyway, I'm very happy about the setback rules you've done on the industrial areas and the front yard, backyard issue. I think that was a good ordinance, and hopefully it works out well for everybody, but it's about time it was done. And also, I am on the DDA, Downtown Development Authority, and we had a discussion about the 100-foot setback, and the folks that have businesses downtown said they would prefer to have more businesses, the better. So that's where I am with that. And also, I'd like to announce that the Cedar Springs Lions Club and Women's Club are having a Valentine's Day kettle corn sale. And you can pick up your kettle corn on Saturday, July 13th. And I'll tell you what's the best kettle corn you ever ate in your life. And it's a fundraiser for Women's Club Scholarship Fund. And Women's Club gives a scholarship to some fine, outstanding young women from Cedar Springs. So you can help us with that. We sure would appreciate it. You'll be seeing more notices around town. Thank you. Is it okay if I pass these out to you guys?
Mr. Conley, I guess I would open up to anybody else who I may have missed on Zoom for any public comments.
I'll hang it outside.
Okay, not hearing anyone, unless did I miss anyone there? Not hearing anyone, we'll move on. Which brings us to my script here. It's time for any conflicts of interest or ex parte communication on the part of the Planning Commission. If you've had any of the above, here is your opportunity to disclose it before we move on. Okay. Not hearing any, we'll move on to scheduled public hearings. There are none. So we'll move on to the next thing. Which takes us to old business, number 9 on the agenda. And the first thing under old business is section A here, White Pine Trails final PUD site plan approval. Can I throw this to Mr. Womack, or should I just to give us just an overview of what we're doing here? I know that Mr. Johnson has a report on this as well, but just especially for the new members, this is something we started a few months ago, and if they could be brought, briefly up to speed as to what this is all about.
Sure. And so this is a new neighborhood that is being planned for property to the north of the city. I believe it'll be called the White Pine Trails neighborhood. It's being put together by Alan Edwin Holmes. Mr. Larabelle, I believe, is the person here representing this tonight. As you indicated, we've reviewed this a number of times. The City Council has also reviewed this. They generally do a very good job. I believe Mr. West is here as well. They do a pretty good job of following the requirements of the city. Everything that they've submitted so far has been pretty high quality. So you can tell that it's a good project when Mr. Johnson's report is less than 1 page long. So they're sitting pretty good today. I agree with the city planner's report. I think they should probably get approval tonight, subject to the conditions listed in Mr. Johnson's report.
Mr. Johnson, do you have anything you'd like to add to that before we move on with this?
I would add just a couple of procedure things, and that is that the job of the Planning Commission tonight is to approve or recommend to decide on the this final PUD site plan. You can approve it in one phase, which I would recommend. And once you approve it, then they're subject to the conditions in my report. I would add one more condition to that to that list. And looking back at the Planning Commission approval back in October, one of the items, a condition of approval back in October by the Planning Commission, was that the Planning Commission would decide how variances should be decided for this planned unit development district. And that hasn't been discussed. I think probably the best way to handle that is to add condition number 6, and that would be to allow future homeowners in this neighborhood to appeal to the Zoning Board of Appeals for variances from the conditions of this PUD and the such as setbacks and that sort of thing, just like a regular subdivision would. So I would suggest adding condition number 6, that variances may be appealed to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Okay, thank you.
Other than that, I think if you're in agreement, then a motion to approve the site plan dated January 8th, 2021, subject to those conditions, would be in order.
Thank you. So, Planning Commission, do you have anything you would like to ask, or any opinions on this whatsoever?
Mr. Conley, do you want to hear from Mr. West or Mr. Larabelle if they have anything to add?
I absolutely will. I can. I think I will. If I got flustered here for just a moment, you gave such a glowing report for it. I'm not sure what else they could say about how great they're doing here, but I'll give them the opportunity to.
Good evening, Commissioners. Mike West with Allen Edwin Homes, 795 Clyde Court, Byron Center. First of all, thank you very much for considering this plan. As Mr. Womack and Mr. Johnson indicated, it's kind of a continuation of the preliminary PUD site plan that was discussed, reviewed for approval. I think the Planning Commission reviewed it in September, October. Council got it in November. We are in compliant with the 5 conditions that were added to that approval. We continue to work with the city engineer on the stormwater agreement. I believe the city attorney wanted some master deed modifications, which we've made. There was a provision also about construction traffic being restricted to Cedar Springs Avenue, not going through Pioneer Trails. We have concurred and agreed with that. Then there's a couple other conditions regarding street trees, which we are going to install, and then side yard setback discussion, and that decision of council will abide by that, as well as the conditions that Mr. Johnson has in his memo, as well as the 6th one he has. We're in full agreement with that. So I know you have a full agenda tonight. Don't want to take up any more of your time, but we appreciate your consideration. We look forward to continuing home construction in Cedar Springs. Thank you.
Thank you. So, what do I hear from the Planning Commission? Would like to make a motion to approve this? Is there more you need to hear? What should we do at this point?
Say we make a motion to approve it, but adding in that whatever Mr. Johnson said for the number 6. I can't word
Would you like
variances.
Would you like a sample motion?
Certainly.
So this is coming right off Mr. Johnson's report. A recommendation that the Planning Commission shall grant approval of the final PUD site plan for Mr. Johnson, your recommendation is for the first phase only?
Nope, all phases.
All phases, okay. Based on the site plan prepared by Ruzian and Associates, January 8, 2021, subject to the 5 listed there, in the addition that all appeals shall have the ability to go to the ZBA through the city's normal processes. Mr. Nixon, would that be your motion?
Yeah, we'll copy and paste that. That sounds like a great idea. You said it spot on.
Yes, that sounds like a great motion. I motion for that.
Okay. And do we have a second for that then?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion before we move on with this? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion on the table, please signify with aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is the item B for the K-Kind recreational adult use marijuana retail store at 206 and 218 North Main Street. Who would like to, from the city here, who would like to help us understand where we're at with that project now, from the city's point of view?
Mike, you want me to take that, or do you want to?
Yeah, if you don't mind. So as the board recalls, I was out of town last week, so I'm playing a little catch up this week. So I'll chime in if necessary.
Okay.
Okay, I will walk you through that, reviewing my report dated February 2nd, 2021. We held a public hearing on this project in January. The Planning Commission provided comments to the applicant, represented by Ron Schaefer. I believe he's tuned in to us this evening. They provided us a new site plan dated January 26, 2021, as well as materials pertaining to requirements of our zoning ordinance for waste disposal, marijuana delivery, customer flow, area impact, and Americans with Disabilities Act. So I'm going to go through what needs to be done here, or issues for your consideration. First one has to do with the pre-qualification letter, which is a requirement of our zoning ordinance. They do have a pre-qualification letter for medical marijuana, but the applicant is looking for adult use. I have not had a chance to check with Laura as to whether the pre-qualification letter for medical is the same as it is for adult use, but based on what Mr. Schaefer has emailed me, and also the other adult use project on our agenda tonight, the information provided from White Pine Provisioning, I get the impression from them that the pre-qualification letter that has been submitted for both of those projects would indeed act as a pre-qualification letter from the state for adult use.
I would concur with that. When the ordinance was written, at that time, the requirement was that they had pre-qualification for medical marijuana. So it was written with the intent that they have at least pre-qualification for medical as part of their application.
Okay, so that issue has really been settled as we get to the end of my report, that we will we'll just accept their pre-qualification letter as working for adult use as well. I have page 2 on my report. We need to decide whether the 6-foot high fence along Pine Street, which is in the required front yard, whether that should be removed, as if they would not be allowed to put it up today. It is there from a previous business, and you would have the authority to require them to remove that 6-foot fence. Also, their site plan shows the 6-foot fence parallel to Main Street, running through the parking lot. I don't think that's going to work, so the applicant needs to explain how that is going to work if that portion of the fence is coming down, which I assume it is. On parking, I had some questions about whether the van unloading area, which is within the 10-foot front setback, is acceptable or not. Our ordinance says you can't have a parking space there. The striped area for van unloading for barrier free, you won't be able to park a car there, but I'm just looking at whether or not you feel that the striped area should be moved 10 feet back or is acceptable within that 10-foot area. They have removed the 5 parking spaces previously shown on Pine Street. They're installing a 6-inch curb along the property line, which is good. Our ordinance requires 18 parking spaces. They show 15, so they'll need to come into compliance with that. There needs to be a 6-inch raised curb or rolled concrete curb around the parking lot. They have provided landscaping along the front and along the rear property lines. Irrigation, our ordinance requires underground irrigation for landscape areas, and they have requested a waiver from that requirement. The Planning Commission may grant that waiver, so that should be on your list of discussion points. Lighting, they appear to be wall packs and under canopy lights. My recommendation is to have the zoning administrator review that to make sure those lights have full cutoff fixtures. Regarding the dumpster, there appears to be a dumpster in the southeast corner of the building close to Pine Street. Our ordinance says it can't be in the front yard, and that's exactly where it shows on the site plan. So they would be required to move that so it's not in the required front yard. One of the biggest points of discussion at our last meeting had to do with traffic flow through the project. And we agree that vehicles should enter from Main Street with a one-way flow through the parking lot, come out onto Pine Street, and then exit back onto Main via the traffic signal. They show arrows on the site plan for vehicles to do that. However, I think some more measures need to be done to ensure that that happens. And I've given you 4 possibilities there in my report. First measure that could be taken is to reconstruct the driveway so it is visible as a one-way drive by narrowing it down to 13 feet and placing signs for no exit. As an alternative, the drive could be reconstructed so it's one way in and a right turn out. And then you could simply just keep it the way it is and put a sign there that says not an exit and hope drivers would go back out the back way. So those are the possible measures, and I think all of them might work. The most effective one would be simply reducing the width of the driveway, but I will leave it to the Planning Commission to decide what is the best way to handle that situation. There was some concern about the facade and the paint colors. I'm going to let Mr. Womack weigh in on that. Other requirements, the driveway into Pine Street must meet city construction requirements. Outside items would be removed as noted on the site plan. Application materials are in pretty good shape. We need a floor plan showing the locations of the security cameras. And then the marijuana delivery plan, the applicant has provided information as to how the marijuana will be delivered to customers inside the store. What our ordinance is looking for there is how is the marijuana going to be delivered to the store? Where will that vehicle park? When will those deliveries be made? Who will be delivering it? And how will it get inside the building? That's the kind of information we're looking for there. I provided analysis of the special land use permit regulations. By and large, it appears to meet those requirements. And then I provided a sample motion for you to consider and also to address the items in my report under summaries, and you should go through theirs and decide how you should address those. That is all I have, Mr. Chairman. If any commissioners have any questions, I'd be glad to respond to them.
Any questions from Planning Commission?
I was curious the reasoning about the fencing is, I don't know if that's a question for you or if that's maybe a question for the person looking to build this, but I was just curious about the height of the fence, if that's a major issue and what the reasoning behind putting that up was.
I'll respond to that. The fence is already there along Pine Street and along Main Street. It was there from a previous business. It can't be within the front yard, a 6-foot high fence. Along Pine Street, it is within the front yard. So you have the authority to require them to move that fence or lower it down to 4 feet, which is allowed.
Okay, thank you. And I guess my other question is, what's the reasoning behind the 18 parking spaces? Is that just in conjunction with the size of the building and the number of people that they expect there to avoid crowding?
It's based on the ordinance requirement of 1 parking space for every, I think, 200 square feet of usable or gross floor area. So based on the square footage of the building, mathematically it works out to 18 parking spaces.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Johnson, looking at the floor plan that I could see, there's a lot of the building that says vacant. There's also, the floor plan does not seem as drawn out as a lot of the other ones with showing the locked doors and stuff. Is that something we should be concerned about, and why there's so much vacant space?
Well, that was one of the items in my report. The previous floor plan had those the areas labeled, and now they're simply labeled as vacant. So I want to let the applicant respond to why they're now labeled as vacant. Apparently, they're not going to be using them, but I'll let the applicant respond to that.
And Mr. Johnson, just one more thing. I had the code enforcement officer go out to investigate this site today, because I don't remember there being a dumpster or dumpster enclosure in the southeast corner of that building. And she reports that there is no dumpster or dumpster enclosure. So I know it's labeled as existing, but there doesn't appear to be anything existing. So in any case, they'd be required to meet our dumpster enclosure ordinance, which if the board wants to approve that, that might be something they might want to make it subject to. But we might want to give Mr. Schaefer an opportunity to respond and see where he's at.
Well, their site plan does show a dumpster enclosure on the site plan. So if it's not there today, their site plan tells us it will be if the site plan is approved. So my comment is our ordinance doesn't allow it to be within the front setback on Pine Street, so they'll have to find another location for it.
Mr. Schaefer, you've been referenced there. This is your opportunity. If you'd like to add anything to the discussion.
Yes, I would. Thank you for, again, considering our motion. Those plans were actually drawn up from our visit there with the original application. At that time, the tenant had a dumpster there. So obviously they have since removed the dumpster and the surrounding fence enclosing that dumpster. And we were unaware of that. So if they have removed it, then obviously that resolves our situation of having a dumpster with a fence covering it up. In regards to the fencing, we have submitted a revised plan to Mr. Johnson showing the removal of the fence through the parking lot, which will terminate at the north edge of the parking lot. We have also added additional parking spots if to accommodate the 18 spaces plus the 6 spaces for employees, which we now have a total of 24 spaces on it. Mr. Johnson, you should have received that from our architect this afternoon, Mr. Schramm.
I received it at 4:59 p.m., so I have not had a chance to look at it.
Yeah, he doesn't work as fast as he used to.
Who does?
Yeah. So we have corrected the major issues there as far as the parking. We also have moved back the striped area to be a green area 10 feet from the east or west lot line. So we now are totally in compliance with the green space, pushing that handicap accessible spot to the east. And so taking care of that, yes, the fence going through the parking lot was removed. That was an oversight. Should have never been there. In regards to the floor plan, our intent is to only occupy the front portion of the facility at this time. We do not need the total space of the building, so therefore we labeled it as vacant. The original drawing showed it as areas that were being used by the previous tenant, so it was a little confusing. So we chose to list it as vacant space for a possibility of additional occupancy at a later date, at which time that occupant would then apply for whatever use required to occupy the space. So our actual usable space is about 2,500 square feet, which is about a lot less than what the total building space is. But again, we'll comply with the required parking for the total size of the building. and puts us at 18 spaces for customers and 6 spaces for employees.
Thank you.
I think those were the major concerns that you had, Mr. Johnson. Is that correct?
Pretty much, yes. Did you mention the fence on Pine Street, that you're going to remove that?
Yes, that shows as being removed on the new drawing.
Okay, I haven't looked at your new plan yet. And you had a request to not install underground irrigation, is that correct?
Yes, with all the plantings that they have, they really don't require underground irrigation since we're not having a mobile lawn there. So the reason of irrigation would really be drowning the plants and probably never be used for its intended purpose. So just hopefully request the waiver of that requirement.
Okay. And then did you have any comments on the one-way traffic pattern?
Yeah, that's we did the arrows as was recommended in the previous meeting. Again, we will have staff out there that will actually be directing traffic. So the initial traffic flow, we found in our other facilities that once we establish some traffic flows with customers, they all seem to follow each other. So with having parking lot personnel starting that process, we're very confident that it will continue to be followed, so that the entry will only be from the west side drive and exit through the drive to Pine Street.
Okay, would you be opposed to putting signs on the building directing people to park there to exit to Pine Street?
Oh yeah, that would be an easy fix. Again, we would just put those by the drive as they're attempting to go back out. Have personnel stopping them before they even get to that point.
If I could ask a question? So are you saying that you would have, during all your business hours perpetually, you'd have people outside directing traffic?
Well, right now you actually have the ability to do what's called curbside business. So you can actually have somebody place an order either online or by our staff that would go out and actually wait on a car, so to speak, just like you used to do at the drive-ins. So that's one of the abilities of the current MRA rules to allow curbside delivery.
Mr. Conley, I'm with you on this. This is going to be a 20-year plan. This is not a one-year plan.
Right.
So, if it's going to be all traffic goes down to Pine Street, we should have signage. We should have arrows painted on the asphalt, something like that, because there's not always going to be people out there directing traffic.
We do have arrows that are painted onto the asphalt.
Okay.
One thing that I was concerned about that I think I heard Mr. Schaefer talk about was possibly having somebody sublet the back of the building. And there is a concern because if another company tries to come in the back of that building, then there's not going to be enough spaces, and then traffic is going to be even more congested.
There is ample ground on the lot to build additional parking. It's very similar to some of the other land uses that are towards Expressway that are multiple tenant buildings that will be and are being approved. This has the same ability as some of those others. And, we don't want to have to devote the total building space to our sole use. So again, that would all be based on whatever requirements that you have in future for any tenant to occupy that space.
Mr. Johnson? So if our original parking plan is based upon the total square footage of the building, would that cover any future subletting of the additional space inside the building because it's made by the building and not by the actual use of when we approve the site plan?
One space for every 200 square feet of floor area is based on a generic retail type use, which which this facility would. If there are some retail uses and some office uses in our parking chapter that are called out specifically that have different parking formulas. So whoever the remaining space was leased out to, depending on what that use was, the parking might change. And there may be enough parking on the site to handle it, depending on the use. If there's not, then we can require that additional parking be provided to meet the ordinance.
Thank you.
If they wanted to sell it, they would have to come up to the city for approval, correct?
I'm sorry, I can't hear her.
If they wanted to sublet, to somebody, that would have to be approved, correct, at that time?
So we would do a separate review at a later date, determine what type of use is permitted there, and what their parking requirements would be at that time, correct?
Yeah, in general, is what I'm talking about.
Mr. Conley, if I could bring something up.
Yes.
So somebody dropped off some paint chips to my office this morning. And I'm looking at the facade of this building. And one of the things we talked about last time was the entire facade of the building being a black color.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Mr. Johnson kind of, I don't want to say he made a joke because he's not that funny, but
Okay, I'm signing off now.
he indicated that some paint chips should be dropped off to show that it's not in fact a black color. Well, the paint chip that I have is called Tricorn Black. So I guess I would ask Mr. Schaefer if, so the ordinance says you cannot have the majority of your building be a black color. So am I just looking at an old facade? Is there an updated facade that is not this black color? What's going on with the facade?
Yes, Mr. Womack, you have two chips there. The black is basically the soffit color, and the corner trims, which would frame the building. The storm gray would be the predominant color of the building. We use those accents on the black just to really frame that building. So this whole area right through here that is now white would be black. This basic side of the buildings would be the storm gray. So,
okay, so this is what I'm seeing, and this is what's in the agenda packet for the planning commission to see. So are you saying what you have now is different from this?
yeah, the rendering that they're capable of doing does not have a very good color choice. So we provided the paint chips to actually show what the actual colors are, and that's what you have, Mr. Womack, is the storm gray as being the body of the building, and just those accent trims being that black color.
Okay. So if that's the case, I like the storm cloud color. It's kind of a grayish, bluish color. I like that. If that's the majority of the building, I think it would meet with our ordinance. But, you know, again, if the planning commission wants to approve it, they might want to approve it subject to a facade showing these colors.
So at this point, I'd like to put this out to the planning commission because I promised Mr. Hall earlier that we wouldn't get into a long discussion on something if it wasn't really ready to go. So as far as the planning commission is concerned, I just, as a straw poll here, I'm wondering if this is something we want to continue digging into tonight, or do we want to table this? Because there's a lot of information here that's being talked about that wasn't presented to us in a manner where we'd have time to look at it. So what's the opinion of the planning commission on this?
I personally am good with moving forward with this, with some contingencies. Obviously the color. I know we didn't really talk about the corrugated front. That was an issue last time. I know there's one thing we didn't discuss either is if the security plan has been reviewed by the fire chief and the city police as well. I know that was in Mr. Johnson's report. So I don't know if we've had that reviewed, and if so, I'd love to hear if it was, and then their response. And I'm fine with moving forward to this as well, as long as we've addressed the parking spaces and the dumpster issue along with it too, because it sounds like the other issues have been addressed from what I've been hearing on this so far.
I just wanted to provide a break point so we could make a decision before we get deeper into this. I'm sorry, I interrupted somebody. I think the person who just uttered that jumped on and jumped off again, but I'm not sure.
I believe, Clint, this is a, take it back and try again. I think we should table this. There is a lot of things that concern me. One thing being that the building has changed with all the vacancy spots there, and that worries me. And now we're having to look at that, and there's just a lot of things that I think, especially the coloring is not right. There's a lot of things that needs to be addressed.
Myself, I think what they showed us tonight with the colors, you know, and the parking, that I think we could go ahead and give them a preliminary approval with the subject to the final approval of colors and parking. I mean, if they were to sublet that in the future, it would have to be approved by the town. So I don't see any reason why we shouldn't give them preliminary approval and move on. I mean, you don't want to keep tabling it month after month.
I would agree with that. Apparently, we have a site plan that's already been sent that has all of the stuff that's been changed on it that we need. So assuming that's all in there and what they said was in there, I think it'd be fine. And for the subletting issue, I mean, it's really impossible to talk about what would be allowed and what wouldn't be allowed. We don't even know what imaginary business would be taking care of that space. It could be an office space or something that literally has no traffic except for the person that's subletting it. It could be a storage space where there's zero traffic. So in terms of, I mean, I get that that's a concern, but as long as it's coming back to the city when that actually happens, and there would be discussion on that, I feel like it's a good point. If we don't even know what kind of business would be subletting.
I'm sorry that there's technical issues still going on with your microphone, and it was really difficult to understand everything you said, which is frustrating for you, I know. I'm sorry about that.
Can you hear me?
Not real well.
Maybe try that. Is this better?
I think,
Hello?
sorry. This, I don't know what options we have there, and it looks like Ms. Johnson is trying to help there, because I definitely want to be able to hear her input.
So, Mr. Conley, while Ms. Johnson's working on that, you know, this is one of those tough positions where Mr. Schaefer seems to have addressed most of the issues that were in Mr. Johnson's report. They just weren't given to us to review until 4:59, what, yesterday, today?
Today.
So the difficulty is we can make them wait another month, do another review, and it should be a perfect report at that point. But now we're 3 months in, you know, we're kind of delaying ongoing progress, and their businesses are backing up behind this one. So, you know, as much as I love to review these things as zoning administrator, you guys can always punt to me. And Mr. Conley, you know, I like to bring you in to review these things as well. If I'm going to suffer, you're going to suffer.
I thought that I would ask, because we have found ourselves in the position many times on many applications where we get pulled down a rabbit hole, and most of the people on the planning commission feel that it's not ready to go. Not saying that that's the occasion here, but we never have a opportunity to stop the train to say, okay, we need more before we go on. So I took this opportunity to poll to see if it was in the will of the commission to do so, and it sounds like it is. So we'll soldier on. If there's any more information that members of the planning commission need, we can continue discussing this, of course, and then we'll take the next appropriate action.
Would you guys be able to talk about if the security plan has been reviewed by the fire chief and the city police? I know that was in there, and I'd just like to know if that's been addressed.
Yeah, so I do send it to them to review, but generally the security plans are state run and state reviewed. I just wanted a copy of what the state's going to review. And then a rule that I tell all of these developers is prior to receiving a certificate of occupancy, myself as zoning administrator, the fire chief, and the sergeant deputy will do a walkthrough to ensure that it is a safe location and meets all our requirements. So yeah, they reviewed it, but it's mostly an on-site prior to the certificate of occupancy issue.
Mr. Womack, one of the processes in all of our sites that we've developed is the final walkthrough is by the local municipality with the fire chief, the police chief, and usually a representative from the municipality to, again, review all the things that were criteria and give the final approval before the actual license is issued. And we're very accustomed to that.
Mr. Conley.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Conley.
I can't hear whoever it is that's making.
Can you hear us from the council room, Mr. Conley?
Yes.
Can you hear us in the council? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes.
You know, I wasn't asked, but in my opinion, there's a lot of information that's not available here. I would be attuned to table this. One might be concerned with the color, and the other is pole barn metal in the front facade. I think, in my opinion, I'd like to see something better.
I could not hear exactly your last sentence there. Was that your, did you say you would, I couldn't tell if you were saying that you wanted to move to do something or if you were just saying that what your preference was. I couldn't actually hear what you said.
I was just to table it because there's a lot of information that's missing. Plus, I have a problem with the color of the building and the metal, the pole barn metal in the facade of the building. I'd like to see something different if possible.
Okay.
If I might adjust the comment to the metal was approved in last meeting because the previous approved applicant had the same corrugated steel in the front of their facility. So again, this is a situation where another issue will come up in subsequent meetings that was already approved in previous meetings. So again, we fully intend to comply with all the requirements to be a tenant and a business opportunity in the city of Cedar Springs. So again, to move forward, we need to get started with some preliminaries. And if not, we'll always have something that is new, and we're always chasing to get something complete. So the ability to have a 100% complete packet would be great, but I don't think it's ever physically possible to be done. So again, we would appreciate your approval to give us a preliminary, and which would allow you to again monitor progress and our compliance with all the issues that are at hand.
Point of order, Mr. Conley.
I'm sorry?
Somebody stated that the pole barn material was approved last month. It was not. And I was the one that brought up the question of replacing it. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't believe that there was a vote one way or the other at the last meeting. There was discussion.
Yeah, I might have misstated that. The approval of last meeting was for the previous applicant to have the same material put onto their facade. So in that case, if it's being approved for a previous applicant, we feel that it should be applicable to us also. Is that correct, Mr. Womack? Was that approved for the first applicant or not?
This is one of those things that I really don't understand what you're talking about. I'm sorry to say that. I don't know which first applicant you're referring to. I don't know which property you're referring to. The ordinance says you can't have corrugated metal. I don't know if what you're proposing is to add corrugated metal. It might have been possible that a different applicant already had corrugated metal in place. I just honestly don't know what you're talking about.
I apologize for that. It was the Loom applicant that I thought was approved to have corrugated metal on the west elevation of their location.
They were denied.
Okay, so at this point, we could take a motion to either approve, or we can make a motion and discuss. We can make a motion to table. I'm going to leave that up to the planning commission to tell me which direction we want to go on this.
I think I'd like to make a motion to approve as long as some of the issues that we've discussed are being corrected. So fixing of the parking spaces to make sure that there's enough that are there, fixing the dumpster issue that we've discussed. The fence has already been addressed. It sounds like the color has been addressed. I think we do need some discussion on the corrugated look. I think it looks good, and especially if our idea is to improve the way our town looks, I think the facade looks really, really good and actually would update what our town looks like. And so I'd like to have a motion to approve with those contingencies. Mike, maybe you can clean that up for me because you're much better with wording that in the way it should be worded.
Well, I'm not going to take the credit because I just read off of Mr. Johnson's report. But Mr. Johnson, do you want to walk him through a motion incorporating what Mr. Hogg just indicated?
Well, yes, I think if you go to the last 2 pages of my report, there's still some issues that have to be resolved, and they're shown in the last page of my report.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the motion is on that page. So that would be the motion you'd want to make, and the reasons for it. And then when you get to the conditions, if you could go through those, and there's only 16 of them. Some of them have been resolved or at least spoken to by the applicant, but I still think because I haven't reviewed their site plan, we should make a yes or no on some of these. So the first one, the pre-qualification letter, does meet the requirements of required by the state. Revise the sketch plan, they'll have to do that. Item 3, the driveway onto Main Street. I haven't heard a consensus from the Planning Commission as to how you want to handle that. So any motion would have to include how the Planning Commission wishes to ensure that there's a one-way traffic pattern through the site.
Am I in understanding that that's been added to the site plan as far as there's arrows that are listed on the asphalt?
There are arrows on the site plan, and you can paint arrows on the asphalt all day long, but eventually they wear off and they tend to get covered by snow.
Yep.
So building signs on the building, or a sign at the somewhere on the property directing drivers to exit by Pine Street should be done, and the applicant could show that on a subsequent site plan subject to staff review.
I think I'd like to see that, because if we have the arrows on there, I understand the snow issue and wearing off. And if we have signs that says entrance only or one way only, I think that would be helpful if we can add that to this.
Anybody else care to jump in on that?
Can you guys hear me?
Speak real loud.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sort of.
Okay.
Taking care of Gary's mic, so.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. If the metal isn't approved by the ordinance, I feel like we have to go by that. I agree with people's opinions on it making it look nicer, and I totally agree with that. However, I don't think it's up to our own aesthetics. We have an ordinance, I like black, but we can't have black. So if it says in the ordinance that there can't be any metal, then that ordinance either needs to be changed so that other businesses can have metal, or they need to go back to the drawing board and bring in something else that doesn't have metal in it. So I think that needs to be specified.
Just to address that for a second, the ordinance actually says you can have corrugated metal, but only as a trim piece. So it can't be the dominant portion of your facade. But Mr. Hall is correct that when Loom, I just went back and looked, when Loom submitted it, it was roundly rejected, and there's no corrugated metal on the Loom project. But I believe we are in the middle of Mr. Hogg's motion. So Mr. Hogg, do you want to make a motion regarding how to address the one-way driveway issue?
I would like to have a sign added that just shows, especially when that parking lot is covered and over time, that shows that as an entrance only, I think would be the best way to address that. Unless our city planner or Mike, if you have a good recommendation, I'd love to hear that. As I'm new to this committee, there's people obviously with much more experience than I that would maybe have some suggestions to make that a reality.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to make it overly complicated, but generally what I would do is I would work with the property owner that if we identified ongoing issues, we would simply say, hey, you got to do this now to, fix the problem. But as a starting point, I agree, probably need some signage. Might want to just leave it at need some signage indicating a one-way a driveway there.
I think that'd be perfect.
Okay. Mr. Johnson, you want to keep walking them through the rest of your report for a motion?
Yes. Item 4 would be they need to provide that marijuana delivery plan acceptable to the zoning administrator. And Mr. Schaefer, do you understand what we're looking for, that type of information?
Yes, I do now. The way it read before was we considered delivery as to the customer, but yes, the secured transporters pull up to the building and will carry nondescript cases into the building, and they are received inside of the building.
If you could put that in the guise of a marijuana delivery plan, we'd appreciate that.
Okay, I can do that. Thank you.
Item 5 in my report, the 6 feet tall fence, I would say must be removed from the Pine Street front setback. The applicant said they would do that. Same thing with number 6, the van accessible striping is not allowed within the 10-foot because they've taken that out. Number 7 is self-explanatory. Number 8, underground irrigation system is or is not required. The applicant has asked for a waiver from that. The Planning Commission has the authority to waive it, but some of that has to be put into the motion. So what is your pleasure there?
Can that be contingent on the type of foliage that is put up front? Obviously, that if that's changed to a lawn that needs to be kept up, I mean, we would need irrigation required. I know we're kind of going a lot into the weeds here, but I'm kind of with Mr. Womack as I'd like to see this move forward.
Mr. Hogg, sorry,
yeah.
You could require that instead of having irrigation, simply that dead plants be replaced.
Then let's add that dead plants be replaced to make it look good, because that's our ultimate goal here.
So number 8 would be the underground irrigation system is not required. Okay, you want that on the record that it's not required. And as far as replacing dead plants, that's already in our zoning ordinance, so you don't need to make a part of the motion.
Love it.
Number 9, lighting plan shall be submitted to the zoning administrator for final approval. Security plan delivery options subject to approval of the fire chief, city engineer, stormwater drainage, and then number 12, if the facade plan presented is or is not acceptable. Anybody have an opinion on that?
Well, the facade, the building as seen on the plans is not acceptable, we're just going to have to go with his promise that it is going to look different. That's kind of scary.
Well, as a suggestion, you could just require that at a subsequent meeting, the facade plan be brought back to you, just the facade plan, so you could spend a little more time on it. All the other portions of the project may go forward, but you could require that they bring the facade plan back to you for more discussion and review.
That seems to be our largest holdup, because it seems like the color issue has been resolved. We just haven't seen those plans, and we'll go with what you guys have seen at the city. So if we can add that in there where we review that facade plan upon approval, that would allow them to move forward, I believe, too, correct?
Yes, you could carve that out, just say as a condition that the facade plan will be subject to future approval by the Planning Commission.
Let's add that then. That would be fantastic.
Okay. Number 13 is, I think, self-evident. 14, 15 as well, and 16. Number 15, we have to take out the reference to marijuana grower establishment. That was a cut and paste job on my part, which needs to be dropped. So that would be it.
And I would add just one more thing, and that be the dumpster enclosure shall meet the city's dumpster enclosure requirements.
Oh yeah, that's part of the list on the sketch plan. We'll go back to number 2. That would be covered there, but good point.
That would be step 17 or point 17.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then I guess, Mrs. Johnson, are you comfortable with that motion?
I'd like to read it back. It's a very complicated motion. Please correct me if don't have it. Move to approve the request from KZ Realtors for special land use permit to establish marijuana retail establishment on property located at 206 and 218 North Main Street, as use is described in the application material submitted and dated 1/26/21 and illustrated on site plan dated 1/26/21, prepared by the Architectural Workshop Inc. Meet the special land use approval standards contained in section 40-571 of the zoning ordinance and the requirements of section 40-575G5 pertaining to marijuana retailer establishments. Approval is granted subject to the following conditions. 1 is stricken. 2, as presented. 3, the driveway into Main Street shall be one way with signs and painted parking added for one-way traffic. 4, unchanged. 5, the 6 feet tall fence must be removed from the Pine Street setback. 6, the van accessible striping is not allowed within the set 10 feet setback on Main Street. 7, unchanged as presented. 8, the underground irrigation system is not required. 9, as presented. 10, as presented. 11, as presented. 12, the facade plan is subject to future approval by the Planning Commission. 13, as presented. 14, as presented. 15, with the removal of and marijuana grower establishment. 16, as presented. 17, dumpster enclosure shall meet the dumpster ordinance.
Mr. Hogg, is that your motion?
May I unmute myself? It is, yes.
Does it have a second?
I second that.
Any discussion? We have a motion on the table. Okay, hearing none, all in favor of approving the motion as it stands, please signify with aye.
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 All opposed? Aye.
Aye.
The motion fails. Do we have any other, excuse me, anything else on this subject before we move forward?
I just think once all those things are fixed, or the majority of them, I would happily approve. I just think it also sets a bad precedent for other companies or any other issue coming forward, having in the team a dozen things that need to be changed for us to approve.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you said, so I can't respond appropriately to it.
This mic is working. I'm still very loudly into this mic. You got to scream into it apparently.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just explaining my vote to not approve. If all those things are fixed and addressed, I would be happy to approve. I think it sends a bad message and precedence for issues coming forward to the planning commission to have over a dozen things that need to be addressed and us approving that.
Thank you.
So if I could jump in then, with your motion then be to table this until the next meeting and give the applicant an opportunity to fix those?
I would be fine with that as long as when we discuss it again, all those things are fixed. Because we had a bunch of those things on the list last time that just got sent to
Would your
Mr.
motion
Johnson.
be to table this to do that?
Yeah, okay, so I motion to table, provided that everything in the failed motion is addressed in paper for the planning commission to look at.
There's a motion to table. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Any further discussion?
What was the motion, please?
Motion to table.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, all in favor of tabling this until the next meeting, please signify with aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? All right, thank you. Moving on to item B. This is the K-Kind recreational adult use marijuana retail store at 206 and 218 North Main Street. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I'm off. We're on item C. Sorry, that's my fault. C, the White Pine Provisioning recreational adult use marijuana retail store and Class C grower at 4116 17 Mile Road. I don't know if Mr. Womack is available. He's off on my screen, or if Mr. Johnson wants to walk us through this, whoever would like to have it.
Sorry, I was in the council chamber for a second, but yeah, Mr. Johnson, if you're able and ready to go, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, I will walk you through this one as well. We have a new site plan submitted by the applicant. Actually, they gave us two sketch plans with the existing driveway and one with the driveway widened by 4 feet. They've given us a new floor plan and a pre-qualification letter from Laura, which we basically learned at our previous discussion that the pre-qualification letter will be accepted. One item that I had not been in the loop on is the requirement that the applicant or the site not abut a property that contains a single family residence. And I know the applicant was trying to resolve that. Mr. Womack, do you have any more information on that you could share?
The last that I heard was that they had a purchase agreement that would resolve the situation. I don't know if the township has approved of that property split, which would be a legal requirement. But we do have a couple of people from that group. We may want to ask them to address it.
And we'll give them the opportunity when I finish my report here. So that is probably, I mean, until they can resolve that, the project can't be approved because our ordinance doesn't allow the parcel to abut or share a property line with another parcel that contains a single family house. The sketch plan they've given us is dated January 21st. There's some comments there about providing another barrier-free space, labeling the doors. Those are items that are pretty easy to take care of. They have provided a new landscaping plan, which is acceptable. Lighting, they're going to retrofit the existing building. The new lights would have to be fully shielded, especially the ones on the building. And my recommendation there would be that the zoning administrator can follow up and make sure that occurs. The waste container, they provided some information to paint the existing enclosure. And that could be a condition of approval. There are no changes to the facade. They are providing a sidewalk along 17 Mile Road, which is on the site plan. And then the driveway, which was a subject of concern at the last meeting, based on the information provided at our previous meeting, that they estimated 300 vehicles per day would be expected. They've now revised that on some information I've received from the applicant in the last couple of days, that I think it's now like 12 per hour. And that would be acceptable in terms of traffic generation. I'll let them elaborate on that in a few minutes here. The application materials that have been provided for security plan, marijuana delivery plan, outreach plan, et cetera, are all acceptable, with one exception that their application materials should remove the reference to provisioning center and Class C cultivation. That's probably a carryover from a previous application in another community. They are not asking for a provisioning center. They are asking for a retailer and grower, and they need to correct that. So it's a minor point. Special land use permit, in my opinion, based on my review in my report, I would say that they meet the special land use standards, especially since the number of vehicles generated on a daily and hourly basis is well within acceptable limits. So I've given you two motions. One is to table it until these items are resolved, or you can approve it subject to the conditions in my report. There were three items to be resolved when I wrote this report. Two of them have been taken care of, one being the pre-qualification letter, and the other being the number of vehicles which had some influence on the driveway. So those have been taken care of. The one that has not been taken care of is the need to resolve the issue regarding the sharing of the lot with a single family house. Until that's resolved, the project could be approved subject to that being resolved, but otherwise it would have to be a condition of approval. So there's a number of conditions in my report along with a sample motion. And if anybody has any questions at this time, I would be glad to respond to that.
How does that work, Mr. Johnson, that once they buy the lot, it still abuts to a house with a lot? I don't understand how the building, now that it has an extra lot, but it still touches a house, how does that work?
I haven't seen a drawing that shows me how it does work. What they would do is, what I think they're trying to do is to buy some property in Solon Township as a separate parcel. So the marijuana facility would not be on the parcel that they are purchasing in Solon Township. It would be a separate parcel in between their parcel and the parcel that contains a single family house. So technically they would then meet the letter of the law that their parcel would not abut a lot containing a single family house. So that's how it would work. I haven't seen a drawing, but I understand that's how I would do it if I was them.
Yeah, and I can add to, sorry, Mike.
I was just gonna say, Mr. Johnson is correct. I would call it being creative with land splits, but that's essentially what they're proposing to do. Mr. Everson?
Yeah, I am part of the applicant, and just to be clear, the land that we're purchasing it's about 10 acres. It's right behind the site currently. It actually goes to the west all the way out to White Creek Road. And the intention there is to use it for another development at some future date. However, the way the land is going to be split from the current residential house, it will be a separate parcel, distinct from ours and distinct from theirs, and it will completely separate the two.
Mr. Haverson, I found a picture of this. Would you like me to put it up on the screen so you could?
That would be great.
So would this be what you're proposing to do?
Exactly, yes.
So you can see up here that there's a complete separation between this parcel and the single family residential parcel.
Correct.
So I guess my question is, I've seen a purchase agreement, but I haven't seen any evidence that it has been approved of by the township. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, so currently we are actually working to get a survey done, which is the first step. And once we have that done, we're actually working with our agent with regard to a split approval with the township. But it's my understanding that that won't occur until the actual date that we close. And on that date, the land will then be split off into a new parcel.
Have you had any discussions with township officials, and have they given their indication whether this is approvable or whether they think it's going to be approved?
I have not, but I've been leaning on the expertise of our agent, who's very familiar with the area and the township, and have given ultimate confidence that there's no issues with regard to it. Obviously, it hasn't happened yet, and so we would just ask that that this be a conditional approval to our application.
Are there any other questions from the planning commission or for the applicant or for Mr. Johnson or about any aspect of this?
One thing I would add is I did have some discussions both with applicant and Mr. Hagsma down at the Kent County Road Commission. Apparently there is some kind of a wellhead or something that's in the grass there, which would prevent the driveway from being expanded much more than the 3 or 4 feet that's been proposed. But I think that with the downward estimation of the number of cars that are going to be in there, and with the improvements that are planned to the asphalt and the concrete there, that it's probably going to be sufficient the way it is. But of course, the planning commission could require that 4 additional feet of width if they think it's necessary.
Mr. Nixon?
I do have a question for the owners of the property, probably Mr. Halverson. So I was looking at the plans and I couldn't see them very well. The restrooms that you have in the lobby, one thing that concerned me was you have restrooms and then the janitorial closet. There was 2 cutouts there between the wall and I think it was a pruning room. Is there windows there or?
There are no windows there. The drawing doesn't do a good example. There are cutouts currently, but that wall will be filled in for those bathrooms leading to the lobby. And it isn't a janitorial closet, more of a chase where we'll have electrical panels and things like that in that room.
Mr. Conroy, can I ask a question
Yes.
for the applicant? What is your intended use, once you acquire that additional 10 acres? How will that additional 10 impact the current site plan you are submitting to us this evening?
To be clear, we have no immediate plans for that. We had planned to ultimately work with the city as well as developers and others to determine what the best use is for that. But we don't have any particular plans at this point in time.
Okay. How would we like to proceed on this? It seemed helpful before to go through all of the things in Mr. Johnson's report to make sure that we've properly addressed the items that are on there. We could do that, or does any other suggestions from the Plan Commission as to what you'd like to hear?
I think the only outstanding condition is the Solon Township splitting up that parcel. So I would like to make a motion to approve on the condition that Solon Township splits up that parcel for them.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you again. I know that's frustrating on your part.
Mr. Conley, can I jump in just before she's able to get her microphone working again?
Sure.
So I understand that we want to move forward, but Mr. Johnson's report does have, I think, 12 points on this one that should be addressed. So maybe if I could put together a sample motion, walk you guys through these points. Would that be acceptable?
Certainly. I didn't know if there was, before we got the cart before the horse, if someone was making a motion or not, or if we wanted to go over the items on here just to make sure we had the necessary discussion, since we didn't seem to have enough discussion before to fully make a decision one way or the other on a motion.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that too. It just sounded like Ms. Hamel wanted to move forward.
Okay, I couldn't hear, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, it sounded like a motion to me, but I do want to make sure we address those 12 points.
They're currently working on a motion now.
While we're waiting, again, being new to the Planning Commission, I was just curious with the 100-foot setback, just the mindset behind, is that strictly for marijuana businesses, or is that for all businesses? If you could talk about that.
Yep. So the current iteration of that ordinance is that marijuana businesses would be prohibited from being within 100 feet of any other marijuana business. So of course, the problem we have right now is we have marijuana businesses coming into town, and since there aren't any that actually exist on the street, they can't see where the other marijuana businesses are proposed to go. And of course, as Ms. Bernadette Powell had indicated previously, there's a belief that the existing or approved marijuana businesses are acting as kind of a block to other properties being sold for marijuana uses. My estimation is that the city council wanted this to be addressed for a couple of reasons, but the number one of which is we've had an overwhelming response from marijuana retailers. This is a small town. We are 3,600 people, and we do not need 27 marijuana retail stores. So I think that was their at least initial way of addressing the number of retail stores. And there have been discussions, I believe, someone on the planning commission last time suggested that the city council, instead of or in addition to the 100-foot setbacks, maybe simply limit the number of licenses that are permitted for retail stores. So the issue is that the city council unfortunately has not met since that comment was made. So I've not been able to address that with them. They'll be meeting next Thursday. So obviously we'll be discussing this a little bit more in depth. That's kind of the background.
Okay, thank you.
Can I check in? Are our technical issues still present, or?
Can everyone hear us in this room, or is it just Mr. Conley that cannot hear us?
I can hear you, but it's a certain amount of clarity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is funny because Ms. Hamill actually has quite a booming voice in person, so I'm not sure why it's not being picked up by the microphone.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's nothing more I can do at this end. We just had a DDA meeting last week and there was no issues, so I apologize. I'll just have Ms. Hamill speak very loudly. I believe she's going to be reading right from the planner's report. So if you guys have any questions, I can clarify after she reads it.
Okay, I move to approve a request from Emily Elms for the special land use permit to establish a marijuana retail establishment and a special land use permit for the marijuana grower establishment Class C license on property located at 4116 17 Mile Road, as the use is described in the application materials dated 11/21/20 and illustrated on the site plan dated 1/21/21 meet the special land use approval standards constrained in the section 4571 of the zoning ordinance. And the requirements of section 4575 pertaining to the marijuana growers and the requirements of the 4575 pertaining to the marijuana retail establishment. I would remove the item 1 requirement, number 4, number 8. All the rest are as presented, and then I would add a 13th condition that's contingent on the sale of the property in Solon Township that creates a buffer between all single-family homes. To clarify, number 4, the underground irrigation system needs not be repaired, and number 5, the facade plan is acceptable. Check out number 8.
Any questions on the proposed motion?
I couldn't hear with enough detail to say one way or the other, so I'm sorry, but if you're able to clarify as you offered to do before, Ms. Johnson, then we could know what we're voting on or discussing.
The motion is as presented by Mr. Johnson in his report. Can you hear me okay, everybody?
I've heard that so far.
Okay. Motion to approve the special land use request and the permit for establishment of marijuana. Everything else is as presented. Item 1 is removed. 2 and 3 are as presented. 4, the underground irrigation system need not be repaired. 5 as presented. 6 as presented. 7 as presented. 8, the facade plan presented at the meeting is acceptable. 9, 10, 11, and 12 as presented. 13 added contingent, so that be contingent on the sale of the property in Solon Township. That would create a buffer between all single-family homes. Clear?
Yes. Do we have a second?
I'm not even too sure what the motion is. I cannot hear hardly anything coming out of that room.
So I heard it fairly clearly. And yeah, I mean, I hate to turn this into a circus. But Mrs. Johnson, can everybody hear me clearly?
I can hear you clearly. Yes.
Okay. So I will attempt to recreate what Ms. Johnson just indicated and what Ms. Hamel just indicated. And then Ms. Johnson, at the end of that, would you simply say yes or no if that is a correct statement of the facts?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this would be starting as motion 2 at page 4 of the city planner's report. There's a motion to approve of the special land use for the marijuana retail establishment and grower operation as described in application materials of 11/21/20 and 1/21/21, and that they do meet special land approval standards. Pre-qualification letter from Laura is acceptable. That's number 1. Number 2 is as presented. Number 3 is presented. Number 4, irrigation system does not have to be repaired. Number 5, as presented. Number 6, as presented. Number 7, as presented. Number 8, as a facade plan is acceptable. Number 9,
As presented.
as presented, must be changed to the recreational standards. Number 10, as presented. Number 11 is as presented. Number 12, as presented. And then number 13, that applicant must submit sufficient proof to establish that there has been an appropriate land split either by the city or the township that would separate their property from the single family residential property. Ms. Johnson, is that a correct recitation of the motion?
Yes, Ms. Hamel, shook her head yes.
That would be Ms. Hamel's motion. Did everybody get that? Does anybody need clarification?
I would like to comment, I believe it was on 4, where they're not required to fix their sprinklers. You know, that the front of that building along Subway has always had a lot of grass. It's never been maintained nicely. I don't understand why we wouldn't want to have the sprinkler system in the front of that building along 17 Mile working like all the other businesses do. Because that has always looked terrible right along there. It's never been maintained. I think they should be required to fix their sprinklers.
I accept your point, but right now we have a motion on the table that's waiting for a second. So if it doesn't get a second, it fails. If it does get a second, we'll continue to discuss it. So does anyone have a second on that?
Amend her motion. Item number 4, the underground irrigation system needs to be repaired.
Okay.
And I would second that.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion, it's been seconded. So any discussion on this? So the irrigation issue I was hearing about this, but I can't say that I'm familiar with it myself. So what is the issue currently with the irrigation system?
There is an irrigation system on site. We just are not sure if the irrigation system is working properly. Just from the maintenance from the old owner, we are not aware of what shape it's in.
Okay.
I can help address some of the other concerns about the way it looks, and it's not an irrigation issue, but we do have a maintenance contract in place to significantly improve that area and keep it maintained.
Okay. Any other feedback from the planning commission or any other questions? Okay, well, I guess we'll put it to a vote. All in favor of the motion, please signify with aye.
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 All opposed?
Aye.
I'm not sure. I think Did you get that, Ms. Johnson, as to the ayes and the nays on that?
Yes, I have 6 ayes and 1 no.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Moving on. D, this is a motion to recommend the approval or denial to the city council. Well, we aren't to the motion yet, but we're considering to approve or deny to the city council for the amendment of the ordinance chapter 40, article 3, division 13, section 40409, entitled commercial and industrial side and rear setback reductions of the code of ordinances for the city of Cedar Springs. I know we've talked about this before, and I saw an interesting report from Mr. Johnson that seems to give us a lot of options on this. I'm not sure if you want to start, Mr. Johnson, with this, or if Mr. Womack, if you figured that out, who wants to address this first.
Well, I'll let Mike start just to maybe give some background on it.
Sure.
So I've moved my screen, so I'll be looking to the side over here. I've got 2 screens set up. So while Mr. Johnson may not be funny, he is very smart, and he's got some really great ideas in there. I think one of the main points that maybe I simply haven't learned yet in this business is the way I've written the proposed ordinance, there is a lot of subjectivity. And maybe we are simply at a position now where we're not a small town anymore. And maybe we need to start adopting these very pro-business type changes, starting with just simply minimizing the setback requirements, which would accomplish essentially the same thing which mine proposed, but with fewer steps. So I'm seeing current side setbacks in the B3 and HC. They could be reduced down. Rear setbacks is 40. You know, maybe simply reducing or changing the rear setbacks instead of having this very elaborate reduction mechanism in place might be the smarter way to go. Mr. Johnson, can you speak to what maybe is common setback requirements in other communities, or what might be appropriate?
Sure. The requirements in Cedar Springs are not uncommon. Neither are the ones that I proposed. They really vary widely by community. Excuse me. But if you're looking to, my response was in response to your proposed ordinance, which I thought was a little bit allowed too much subjectivity and resulted in the Planning Commission acting as a zoning board of appeals, subject to different standards. And I could see some possibility of not abuse, but just future planning commissions just deciding if the developer asks for it, well, we'll give it to them because we're business friendly. So I think by putting the standards in here, making sure what the standard is, the developer knows coming in, they can design their site to what the ordinance requires rather than designing it based on what they think the planning commission will give them. And developers are like most people in life, they want some certainty in things. So I think it's better to have the setback be what it is rather than leave it up to the commission to grant it on a case-by-case basis. So the setbacks I've given you here are, in my opinion, just as common as any place else in the state. And if you want to provide developers with more options to move their building around, then you want to move in the direction of reducing the setbacks as I've shown you here. But it's the first time you've seen it. Maybe you want to think about it.
I have a question for Mr. Johnson. I know whenever we're talking about things like setbacks, any of these rules that are set in, you know, maybe not stone, but at least hardened mud, we have a reason to have setbacks in the first place. But we don't make setbacks infinite because we want to have some ability for people to use their property. So what would be some of the negative reasons for making these setbacks a little smaller so that the developers would have more ability to use the property? What would be some things against that?
Well, if you reduce the setbacks, you're going to have a little more crowded look along the street. Again, some of these are industrial, and if for industrial buildings, I don't think that's a big deal, because industrial zones are typically not frequented by the general population. And so I don't think that's a big deal to reduce those. In the B3 zone, again, letting the buildings come to the side lot line and have a 0 or 10 foot, you're still going to have 10 feet between buildings the way I've set it up here. You can have your building right on the lot line. And if I get there first, I can have a 0 lot line. The building that comes in next to me has to be at least 10 feet away to provide for air, light, landscaping, water drainage, people passage, or they can be tight to each other as they would in the downtown. So again, we're not reducing the front setback, we're doing the rear and the side. You still have the requirement that if it abuts residential, they have to have a 50-foot setback. We would still keep that in place. But if the use behind it is also commercial industrial, I don't see any issue there with letting the building come closer to the lot line if that's how the developer wants to lay out their project. So I can't think of a lot of negative issues. Again, a lot of it goes to aesthetics and passage around the buildings more than anything else.
Okay. Because we have this fight a lot, and fight is maybe a bad word. We have this concern a lot about, here's a line drawn in the sand, so to speak, of a building can't go beyond this. But I, as a planning commission member, and this might, inform some of the issues we've had in the past where we have the desire to move around what the ordinance says. As a planning commission member, I'm never 100% sure why that line is there. So I know that there has to be a line somewhere, but I'm not sure where that, where those numbers came from in the beginning. So what are we missing if we move them? That's why I thank you for your input on that.
Well, I've been in this business for a long time, and I'm still not sure why some of these numbers are in there. They just get carried over sometimes from one community to another. And there's a reason for setbacks, as I laid out in my report. But is 25 feet better than 30? Not really. All depends on how you want your community to look, because however you set the rules, that's how your community is going to look. So I think you could go with these. I think you should think about it, frankly. If you want to get real technical, someone could come up with a series of drawings to show, here's what the buildings would look like at your setbacks. Here's what they would look like on a drawing if you adopted these. And then you could look at it and decide, well, I don't like either one of them. Let's try a third one. So, but that takes time and money to do that.
Is there a nearby community that has maybe the smaller setbacks that you've described that you said are relatively common that we could reference?
Some of them are in Greenville, Ionia. I tried to look at cities. Those are also our clients. So I looked at their setbacks, and some of them are shorter and some of them are a little bit bigger. So again, there's not a lot of rhyme and reason to it necessarily. These are all in the ballpark, so to speak.
One thing I would add, Mr. Conley, is I believe that the front setback is probably the most dominant one for setting the tone and look of your city, whereas the rear and side setbacks are a little bit less noticeable. And so by changing the rear and side setbacks, we could enable developers more room to work while keeping the front setback the same. Mr. Johnson, is that a fair statement?
Yes, it is. Yeah. And keep in mind that, let's say we reduce the side setback in the industrial zone to 10 feet. Well, no developer is going to have a building where on both sides, it's 10 feet on both sides, because they want to be able to get to the rear of the building. So they're going to leave room on one side for a passage for vehicles for unloading in the back and that sort of thing. But that gives them more room to maneuver on one side by moving the building over to 10 feet on the other. So it does provide a little bit more flexibility. And you also have a requirement in your ordinance that a building can't cover more than 40% of the lot. So if you keep that intact, that that's a good way to make sure that you don't have too large of a building on any lot in town.
Okay.
So Mr. Conley, if I could maybe present an option. So again, I was on vacation last week, so I didn't get as much time to play with this as I would have liked. I think Mr. Johnson's got some very compelling ideas here. I would like some additional time to digest and maybe put this in a different format and then make a new suggestion to the Planning Commission at the next meeting.
Okay.
I have a comment.
We don't actually have any motion or anything on the table. We can, so, excuse me, I'm sorry about my voice going away. Does Mr. Hall, is there a, did I see your hand up over there?
Yes, I have a comment. You know, we look at these ordinances and what are we trying to fix with them? You know, we have some issues here in town with a B2 and B3 have adjacent property lines. Now, how's that going to impact that dual zoning area? But, you know, I always look at like, what are we trying to fix with this ordinance change, I guess, in my mind?
Well, the simple answer would be that developers always want more flexibility. And if we are attempting to be more business friendly, we generally want to provide them with more flexibility. So I guess the answer would be trying to be more business friendly at the end of the day.
Is it safe to move on then, or does anyone else have anything they'd like to add to this? Okay. Well, thank you. We look forward to seeing your well drafted and worded new. I can't speak anymore. We'll take whatever you give us. Anyway, so moving on to E. This is the ordinance to amend Chapter 40, Article 1, Section 46, entitled Definitions, N through Z, Chapter 40, Article 4, Section 40 to 468, entitled Marijuana Establishments and Facilities, Chapter 40, Article 8, Section 4475, Paragraph G, entitled Marijuana Establishments of the Code of Ordinances for the City of Cedar Springs. What can you tell us about this, Mr. Womack?
So not to be anticlimactic, but I guess I'm a little bit enamored with one of the comments from the last meeting, which was maybe the city council needs to explore limiting the number of licenses, either as an alternative to or in addition to the 100-foot setback proposal. You know, the Planning Commission can make recommendations right now if they want, but what I would ask, and my preference would be, is to yet again kick this to the city council and say, hey, you know, would you like us to explore the limiting the number of licenses as an alternative? So that would be my request, is that you punt this back to the city council for a discussion on that issue.
Yeah, Mr. McGrath?
I'm actually in favor of that too, to let the city council address it. And I'd rather see the license requirement get some discussion and then have us discuss it after that.
Okay. Any other comments or additions to that? Okay, well then we'll move on. Item F, walls and fences ordinance.
Not that I'm trying to hurry you guys home and be done with this, but
Sure, go ahead.
You know, I keep wanting to put these things in front of you, not so much because I demand action right now, but I want familiarity with it. You know, this is something that we talked about multiple times, what, about 6 months ago, a year ago. The fence ordinance we have here in the city is very basic. I don't think it addresses a number of the kind of more complex issues that we have in the community. There is one change that I want to make to the draft ordinance you see right here, and that was something that Ms. Bremer was working on before she left the Planning Commission, and that is language to allow the use of agricultural fencing and chicken wire for something less than your, fence that goes around your yard, to use it for your garden or something to that effect. So I guess I would stand and ask if anybody has any specific concerns at this time regarding the draft that they've read, and I will continue to bring it back until I feel secure that we're ready and able to make a suggestion and recommendation of the city council.
Anything from the planning commission? You're all at least had a chance to read it and know that at some point the homework's going to be due. Okay, good enough. Then moving on, there is no new business under 10. I'm sure you're happy to hear that. And open discussion for issues not on the agenda. There's item A is correspondence. Do we have any correspondence?
You know what? You're absolutely 100% correct. And Bryn Powell reminded me of this, and I didn't say anything about it at the beginning of the meeting, and I apologize. So it was certainly not my intention. I did receive a public comment that I failed to read into the record. So if you would permit, I'll do that now.
Certainly, it's correspondence, so I think it could go here as well.
Yeah, and so this issue has not been addressed, so this is still timely in my opinion. And of course, I emailed it to all the board members, but I'll read it to the record now to ensure that we are uploading our own policy. So, dear ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost, thank you for your service to our great city. Public office can be difficult and thankless. I do appreciate your time and commitment to Cedar Springs. I would like to speak to the proposal to limit the distance between marijuana licensing to 100 feet in the downtown district. I understand that the initial idea for unlimited licensing was to encourage new money to come into Cedar Springs and renovate and update downtown. It will be counterproductive to that goal to limit the distance between establishments. Without these limitations, entire blocks of the city may enjoy cosmetic and structural facelifts, ADA compliance updates, security improvements, and increased foot traffic for downtown. With these limitations, there will be a checkerboard of improvements and overall fewer actual improvements done. Marijuana businesses are very limited where they can locate per the city's established ordinance. Building owners like myself can move anywhere downtown and make improvements to some other building. For example, if my building were to sell, I would have the financial means to then buy a different building and renovate that building, essentially creating the possibility for a 2-for-1 improvement. It is concerning that it took 2 years to establish the ordinance for licensing, but the amendment to limit distance between is potentially being adopted in a matter of just a few weeks. The negative implications of instituting a distance restriction are very impactful for the improvements that we all want to see in the downtown district. I strongly urge you to follow the original plan for unlimited marijuana licenses without further restrictions. Please choose not to limit free enterprise. Thank you for your time and attention to this matter. Kelly Rice, Managing Member, RMK Land Holdings, LLC, owner, Hawks Nest. Address. I apologize for that.
Thank you. Is that all the correspondence?
That is all the correspondence that I have, yes.
Okay, moving on to staff comments. The city manager is up first.
I sometimes feel like a broken record. I will thank all the board members. This is very difficult work. I appreciate all the time and effort you put into it. We are now at the 2-hour mark. And I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but thank you, thank you, thank you.
Anything, any comments from the city clerk?
Just wanted to apologize for the technical difficulties tonight. Last week we had a DDA meeting and everything ran great. So we'll get our technicians out here and see if we can fix the problem. Also, just keep an eye out for any trainings that may be coming up. I will email the information as it comes up. January, February is generally the time that they start doing those trainings, but because of COVID, they may not be doing those in-person trainings. So as I get the information, you will be provided with it.
Thank you, and we're sorry we made you run back and forth so many times in the middle of this meeting. Planning Commission members, the opportunity for your comments. Looks like everyone wants to go. So I'll just comment really quickly once again. Thank you, Mr. Merlington. We didn't have a chance the way the meetings start to really properly welcome you. Thank you for coming and volunteering to do this. And thank you for all that have come to replenish our ranks, because we got quite short there for a bit. And it's a steep learning curve. I get it. There's a lot going on here. So if you have any questions or concerns or problems, just make sure you ask Mike. So, and me, either one. So thank you. And do we have a report from the city council representative?
I don't know if you can hear me all, but I'd like to welcome all the new members of this to the planning commission. We have a lot of things going on, and I guess I'll only leave you with when we make an ordinance, what are we trying to fix? We're not going to make everybody happy. We're going to make some, but by looking at what's best for our community, in the end, that's where we need to be to make Cedar the best ever. And I welcome everyone to the meetings, and thank you for all. Good evening. We've been here too long.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Well, I'm not sure if it's better to be funny or smart, but I'll take what I can get.
Oh, is that it?
That's it.
Well, brevity is the soul of wit. So there you go. And with that, I think that we're adjourned. So enjoy the rest of your evening. What's left of it. Thank you.
Thank you.